Welcome back to the Paranormal State, Washington, and UFO UAP. With Makāula Nakae, a lifelong experiencer and ET contactee since 1990. Today's episode: France in UFOs and the Paranormal. Amidst the boiling UAP disclosure debates in the US Congress, one might wonder how the rest of the world is reacting. If you were to stop a random person on the street in Paris and ask if they believe in little green men, they would likely roll their eyes with a quintessential blend of French annoyance and irony. Yet, beneath this polished veneer of Cartesian skepticism, France maintains a surprisingly rich, deeply institutional, and culturally unique relationship with UFOs, UAPs, and the paranormal. When exploring how different nations handle high strangeness, France stands utterly alone. While most major countries have historically treated unidentified flying objects with official denial, mockery, or strict military secrecy, France achieved a global first, institutionalizing UFO research as a legitimate, transparent public scientific endeavor. The crown jewel of this approach is GEIPAN, an organization that has set the gold standard for how a modern government can study aerial anomalies without falling into the traps of sensationalism or cover-ups. The uniqueness of the French model begins with where the organization lives within the government. GEIPAN, the group of studies and information on non-identified aerospace phenomena, is housed directly inside CNES, Centre National d'Études Spatiales, the French equivalent of NASA. Operating out of the aerospace capital of France, GEIPAN is staffed not by conspiracy theorists or internet sleuths, but by aerospace engineers, technicians, data analysts, and scientists. They work alongside a consulting board of external experts, ranging from meteorologists and psychologists to military radar specialists. Founded originally as GEIPAN in 1977, under the visionary backing of CNES director Hubert Curien, the unit has continuously evolved through various iterations, SEPRA, then GEIPAN, to provide uninterrupted, state-backed scientific inquiry into the unknown for nearly half a century. GEIPAN operates under three core missions: collect data, investigate rigorously, and inform the public. Unlike military intelligence agencies that hoard data for national security, GEIPAN functions as a public-facing scientific service. GEIPAN maintains an open, fully searchable public database containing thousands of historical and modern case files. Anyone in the world can log on, read detailed witness testimonies, view radar charts, examine police interview transcripts, and see the final scientific conclusion for individual cases. When a sighting is reported, GEIPAN does not just take a phone call. They deploy a structured protocol. They collaborate closely with the Gendarmerie Nationale, National Police, and the French Air and Space Force. Police officers are trained to interview witnesses using standardized scientific forms, collecting precise angles, environmental data, lighting conditions, and physiological effects. To maintain absolute scientific objectivity, GEIPAN does not use loaded terms like aliens or flying saucers. Instead, they categorize all investigated cases into standardized PAN, Feynman aerospatial non-identifié classifications. PAN A, cases that are fully identified with absolute certainty, EN, weather balloons, commercial aircraft, planets, satellite flares, re-entering space junk. PAN B, cases that are likely identified, where the data points heavily toward a conventional explanation, even if minor details are missing. PAN C, cases that cannot be analyzed due to a complete lack of verifiable data or poor witness memory. PAN D, the holy grail of the database. These represent cases that possess high-quality, highly reliable data, multiple credible witnesses, radar confirmation, physical traces, or clear photographs, but defy all conventional scientific explanation. What makes GEIPAN profoundly respected in global ufology is its brutal honesty. Over decades of investigations, the vast majority of reports, 96%, are successfully resolved. France's skies are crowded with weather balloons, Starlink satellite trains, military exercises, and optical illusions, and GEIPAN is the first to prove it. However, a small, stubborn percentage, consistently hovering around 3% to 4% of deeply investigated cases, remain strictly classified as PAN D. These are the crown jewels of the archive. Incidents where military pilots, trained scientists, and multiple independent citizens watched structured, physical anomalies that maneuvered outside the laws of known aerodynamics, backed by hard radar and physical evidence. The French exception proves that a government can approach UFOs with cool-headed scientific rationalism and radical transparency, rather than secrecy or ridicule. By anchoring UAP investigation inside a national space agency, like CNES, France elevated the study of the unknown out of the tabloid shadows and into the halls of legitimate scientific inquiry. When examining how France interacts with high strangeness, you encounter a fascinating cultural paradox. On the surface, French intellectual life is built on a bedrock of hyper-rationalism and rigorous skepticism. Yet beneath that polished academic facade lies a rich, enduring appetite for the mysterious, the folkloric, and the cosmic. France's intellectual identity is deeply rooted in the philosophy of René Descartes, the father of modern rationalism, and the 18th century Enlightenment, which championed empirical science, systematic doubt, and logical deduction over superstition. In French academic, journalistic, and high culture circles, displaying uncritical belief in the paranormal or fringe pseudoscience is historically frowned upon. To be taken seriously in intellectual discourse, one is expected to approach claims with sharp critical thinking and a demand for hard empirical proof. Because French culture places such high social capital on being articulate, logical, and scientifically grounded, discussions regarding UFOs or ghosts are rarely approached with unbridled, table-pounding sensationalism in mainstream public forums. Skepticism is the default intellectual baseline. Despite the societal expectation of strict Cartesian rationalism, sociological and opinion polls tracking public sentiment in France reveal a very different reality. National surveys consistently demonstrate that a strong majority of the French population believes that intelligent life likely exists elsewhere in the universe, reflecting a comfortable alignment between modern scientific cosmology and popular imagination. When surveyed confidentially, a substantial portion of the French public, frequently hovering between 30% and 40%, admits to a personal belief in our fascination with paranormal phenomena, including telepathy, haunting manifestations, and occult forces. The quiet private belief in the unknown exists in direct counterpoint to public intellectual restraint. While Paris and major urban centers project a secular, hyper-rational environment, rural France, La France profonde, is saturated with ancient myth, sacred geography, and dark local legends. Long before modern history, ancient populations erected thousands of massive stone alignments and menhirs across regions like Brittany, such as the legendary standing stones of Karnak, providing a tangible, physical connection to prehistoric architectural mysteries. The Beast of Gévaudan. In the 18th century, the rugged hills of southern France were terrorized by a mysterious wolf-like creature or pack that killed dozens of people, sparking a massive royal manhunt ordered by King Louis XV. It remains one of history's most famous cryptozoological mysteries. France is home to globally famous sites of profound spiritual high strangeness, most notably Lourdes, where millions of pilgrims have traveled for over a century following reported miraculous visions of the Virgin Mary and documented physical healings. The French relationship with the unknown is characterized by a unique duality: Cartesian skepticism in public and a rich, imaginative fascination with mystery in private. By balancing an intellectual demand for empirical proof with a deeply rooted heritage of ancient legends, sacred sites, and rural folklore, France maintains one of the most culturally sophisticated approaches to the paranormal in the world. While France's institutional approach through GEIPAN provides official scientific credibility, the true foundation of French ufology rests upon a series of extraordinary, highly documented physical encounters. From scorched earth and rural gardens to massive radar-confirmed craft over the capital, French history features some of the most compelling close encounter files in global ufology. The Trans-en-Provence incident, 1981, the gold standard of physical trace cases. Widely regarded by international scientists and ufologists as one of the most physically verifiable UFO cases in modern history. This encounter occurred on January 8, 1981, in the rugged countryside of southern France. A local farmer working on his property heard a faint whistling sound and turned to see a disc-shaped metallic object, roughly 2.5 meters in diameter, descend and briefly touch down on the ground just a few dozen meters away. After a minute, it lifted off silently, leaving behind a faint sulfur smell and accelerating away at high speed. Unlike typical sightings that rely solely on human memory, This case left undeniable physical alterations. Investigators from GEIPAN, then GEPAN, and independent French laboratories rushed to the scene and discovered a distinct circular ring of compressed, scorched earth. Rigorous biochemical and botanical analysis of the soil and surrounding vegetation revealed irreversible thermal and mechanical stress. Plant cellular structures showed accelerated aging and chlorophyll degradation that could not be replicated by ordinary machinery, cementing Trans-en-Provence as a textbook trace case Category D. The Great 1954 Wave, Flying Cigars and Rural Encounters. Long before modern internet viral loops, the autumn of 1954 witnessed one of the most intense, widespread social and anomalous phenomena in European history. For several weeks, all of France was swept by an unprecedented wave of thousands of reported sightings. Witnesses across rural villages and towns described seeing massive, cigar-shaped aerial craft gliding silently over fields and vineyards. The 1954 wave went far beyond simple lights in the sky. Dozens of farmers and motorists reported encountering small, hairy, or suited humanoid occupants emerging from landed craft, interacting briefly with locals or surveying the landscape before vanishing. This massive wave profoundly influenced European science fiction, folklore, and public consciousness, forcing early French intellectual circles to take the possibility of anomalous aerial visitors seriously for the very first time. The Air France Flight 3532, 1994. A giant craft over Paris on January 28, 1994. The crew of an Air France commercial flight, operating between Nice and Paris, experienced a textbook close encounter that completely shattered any notion that UFOs were merely a rural superstition. As the Airbus A320 approached Charles de Gaulle Airport and began its descent over the Paris region, the captain, co-pilot, and a flight attendant watched in astonishment as a massive, dark, floating, structured object appeared in their airspace. Described as resembling an inverted V, or a giant, silent, floating triangular structure, the object hung motionless or drifted slowly at low altitude, forcing the flight crew to monitor it closely to ensure safe separation. The anomalous craft was not just a visual illusion, it was simultaneously tracked and confirmed by ground air traffic radar systems. Despite exhaustive official debriefings and investigations by French aviation authorities, the object defied conventional identification, securing its place as one of the premier commercial airline-witnessed UAP cases in aviation history. When examining how the modern French public interacts with ufology and the paranormal today, you find a subculture that reflects the country's broader cultural temperament. Quietly engaged, intellectually curious, but intensely protective of social credibility. Unlike regions where high strangeness is broadcast with explosive theatricality, the modern French scene operates under a culture of subtle discretion and digital age exploration. In contemporary French media, how the topic of UAPs is treated depends entirely on the tone of the delivery. While countries like Mexico occasionally feature open-minded, serious primetime news broadcasts on anomalous phenomena, mainstream French television and major newspapers generally avoid treating ufology as hard geopolitical news, unless forced to by official government disclosures or international events. When the subject does break into mainstream outlets, such as reporting on a newly published GEIPAN file or a curious meteorological anomaly, it is usually framed with a gentle, winking irony. Journalists often couch the story as a quirky human interest piece or a light-hearted weekend curiosity, driven by a collective professional fear of appearing gullible or facing journalistic ridicule in intellectual circles. Because mainstream media maintains a polite arm's-length distance, the true energy of French ufology has migrated entirely to the digital sphere and independent networks. A thriving ecosystem of French-language podcasts, YouTube channels, and dedicated research collectives analyze global UAP disclosures, historical flap waves, and consciousness studies. French enthusiasts consume a rich mix of global literature, heavily incorporating translated Anglo-Saxon research, investigative books, and American congressional hearings into their community discussions. French ufology proudly maintains its own towering global titans, most notably Jacques Vallée, the pioneering astrophysicist, computer scientist, and venture capitalist originally from France, who helped shape modern scientific approaches to UAPs. inspiring the French researcher community to look beyond nuts and bolts extraterrestrial hypotheses toward broader dimensions of consciousness and information theory. Ultimately, the modern French relationship with high strangeness comes down to a social code of conduct. While a French intellectual or professional might publicly scoff at fringe pseudoscience in a boardroom or academic symposium, that same person will gladly spend hours debating the mysteries of the universe, ghosts, or the Trans-en-Provence landing over a bottle of wine with trusted friends. It is a culture where people are deeply fascinated by the unknown, but prefer to explore it with intellectual sophistication rather than shouting it from the rooftops. When examining how different nations confront the unknown, a comparison between France and the United States reveals a striking divergence in institutional philosophy, cultural temperament, and media landscape. While both countries grapple with the reality of unidentified anomalous phenomena, UAPs, their respective approaches reflect deeper national character traits. America treats the UFO file as a high-stakes political thriller and a battleground for state secrecy, whereas France approaches the subject with the quiet, methodical rigor of an administrative and scientific endeavor. The most profound institutional contrast lies in how each government manages the phenomenon. For nearly half a century, France has provided a stable, permanent home for UAP investigation through GEIPAN, housed directly within its civilian space agency, CNES. By integrating aerospace engineers, scientists, and standardized police reporting protocols into a public-facing database, France treats aerial anomalies as a routine, long-term scientific data-gathering exercise. In stark contrast, the United States handles disclosure through dramatic political friction. American ufology is driven by explosive congressional whistleblower hearings, executive unsealing directives, and shifting military task forces such as ARO. Rather than a quiet administrative duty, U.S. oversight resembles a continuous tug-of-war between institutional transparency and national security secrecy. This institutional divide is mirrored in the public tone and media appetite of each nation. American ufology frequently oscillates between sensationalist mass media coverage, deep-seated conspiracy narratives, and speculative pop culture phenomena. It is a loud, highly visible public arena. France, by contrast, operates under a cultural umbrella of measured intellectual discretion. Rooted in a Cartesian tradition that prizes critical thinking and empirical skepticism, French society investigates the unknown with strict technical rigor, while managing the topic socially with a subtle wink, ensuring that an interest in the unexplained never compromises one's intellectual standing. Ultimately, these two cultures produce entirely different narratives of the unknown. While the United States views the UFO phenomenon as an unfolding national security epic demanding answers and accountability, France treats it as a persistent scientific and administrative mystery, to be cataloged quietly in government archives, analyzed with cool rationalism, and debated leisurely over a glass of wine. To be continued. Watch and listen. Watch the cinematic video trailer. Listen to the full podcast now. Explore the archive Cosmic Awakening Volume 1, 1991, Peru, Journey into the Unknown. Sacred Valley of the Incas. Volume 2, Ascension 2012, The Golden Alchemy. Part 3, The First Contact, The Paranormal State. Join the journey. New episodes drop periodically. Each chapter delivers a tight, hyper-focused 10 to 30-minute hit of real-life experiences, perfect for your daily plunge into consciousness exploration. Subscribe to support your inner development. Thumbs up to help push our channel through the algorithm. Comment below. Share your thoughts on today's episode.